Welcome back. Well, my next guest in the PC leadership lineup is the MPP for Newmarket Aurora, Frank Klees. Welcome back to Focus Ontario. Mr.
Great to be here with you.
So, why should you be the next leader of the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario?
Sean, I've been letting our membership know in the course of this campaign that I believe I'm uniquely qualified for the job. I have 25 years of real life business experience. Before I was elected in 1995, I think that's very important. Particularly given these tough economic times, that the Premier of this province knows what the real world is like and knows what business needs to not only recover but also to go on to prosperity. I have 14 years as an MPP, as a cabinet minister. I know how government works. Probably what's more important than knowing how government works is, over that period of time, finding out what it is about government that doesn't work. And I am looking forward to fixing those things. And in addition to that, I have 35 years of in-the-trenches experience with our party as a very active member of our party. And in that capacity, I had the opportunity to introduce to our party a grassroots policy development process that when our party follows it, we win elections.
Okay, so let's talk some policy then.
Okay.
Issue that your party, everybody in your party has been talking about, is a blended sales tax. Comes up almost the lead question almost every day in Queen's Park. You've said recently you would not abolish the tax because it would be in place a year and a half, presuming Mr. McGuinty carries through with it. But you'd cut back. You'd cut it. How much and why?
Well, first of all, Sean, I was the first member of our caucus to stand in the legislature when Dalton McGuinty was just musing about bringing in the HST. And I challenged him at that time to say, don't do it. It's the wrong time. No one can argue with wanting to have a tax system that's more efficient and streamlined, but this is the wrong time to impose $2.5 billion of additional taxes. And so
okay, but he's got a majority government.
Well, he does, but you know, notwithstanding that, what we're trying to do is at least vigorously oppose it and draw his attention to the fact that he shouldn't be implementing it, and that's a position I've taken. Now, if he does implement it, and you know, Dalton McGuinty is addicted to taxes, that's very obvious. So if he follows his tax addiction and does introduce this, it's going to cost businesses millions to put the structure in place to actually collect that tax. And so I believe it'd be irresponsible for me to say, well, if he implements it, then we'll deconstruct that because that'll cost businesses millions more to do. So I've said at the very least what should happen is that the provincial sales tax rate should be decreased, similar to what other provinces have done. For example, Nova Scotia, when they implemented it, they brought the tax rate down by 3.5%. So I'm saying,
how much?
Well, you know, we'll have to see what the impact is at that time. But by how much specifically is exactly by the amount of pain that the McGuinty increase has caused consumers and businesses. That's the amount by which I want to reduce it.
Okay, well, sales tax projected to bring in this year about $17.5 billion to the Ontario coffers. A lot of money.
It is.
Don't you think people have a right to know how much you'd cut it?
Well, again, what I want to do is cut it by the amount of pain that Dalton McGuinty has laid on consumers and businesses. And if it happens to be 2.5% or 3%, we'll assess it at that time. My commitment to the people of Ontario is that I believe that the consumers and businesses in this province cannot stand that additional tax pain. And I'm committed to reducing it by that amount.
Now, when Mr. Harper cut the GST federally, most economists, even conservative economists, would say it's cutting sales taxes least effective form of tax cuts. Doesn't it, and generally speaking, helps the rich more than the poor.
I look at it another way, Sean. I look at it this way, that what Dalton McGuinty is doing now is he's putting an additional 13% tax on thousands of products and services that were never taxed before. That's the impact of this. And so people are going to see taxes on gasoline, on their cable television bills, everything that you can think of. Even funerals are going to increase. I just got the information yesterday by on average of $800. Look, people in this province are suffering under one of the worst recessions in the history of this country. The wrong time to put additional taxes on average people, hardworking people, people who are losing their jobs. It's just fundamentally wrong.
Okay. setting aside taxes for a moment, what else would you have done differently if you were in the Premier's chair today in this recession?
Well, first of all, I would have had an economic plan. And back in October of last year, you know, this was long before the issue of global recession was on the radar screen. I stood in the legislature, you may recall, and I called on the Premier at that time to strike a select committee of the legislature to establish an economic strategy for the province of Ontario, so that we would have very specific direction, that we would have some targets, that we together would consult with stakeholders, with the business sector across this province, so that we would know what to do.
Okay, but that's process, though.
That.
That's process. Specifically, what would you do differently? I mean, they've kind of mirrored the federal budget. They're spending a lot of money, going into deficit, and also offered business tax cuts.
Here's where we start. We have to make Ontario an attractive place for businesses to want to be. And so we start off by stripping the burden of regulatory red tape that is now costing Ontario businesses an estimated $18 billion a year. We're going to get rid of that. The second thing is that we're going to create some tax incentive zones. I think it's important that Ontario roll out the red carpet for business, not red tape.
So what's a tax incentive zone? Tell me what you mean by that.
Well, I'll tell you what that means. That means that we would identify areas across this province where we want specific businesses to locate and give them an opportunity to come there by giving them corporate tax breaks, by working with municipalities to provide alleviation for property taxes, assessment exemptions. I think those are the kinds of things that Ontario finally has to start looking at. It's being done in all of our competing jurisdictions. We need to attract investment. Let's talk about another aspect. I believe that we need to incent businesses to create jobs. And so how about a $2,500 tax credit to businesses that create new jobs? $2,500 per job tax credit. Something else I want to do, I want to let young people know that there is actually a future for them in this province. And so one of the things I'm asking our party to consider is to create a tax exemption for young people graduating from university, college, and a trade, so that for the first 4 years, when they're getting established in their careers, there would be no provincial income tax payable by these young people. Let's give them a chance to get started in their careers.
Okay, only a minute left. You're talking about lots of tax cuts. We've got a big deficit right now. Are you saying you want to get us out of deficit quickly, and how quickly, and how do you get there? Are you talking about cuts elsewhere?
There's only one way that you get there, and that's through economic development. The priority for this province, the priority for a government that I lead, would be that we focus on the resources that we have in this province. We need to unleash the entrepreneurial spirit of this province. We need to create the jobs, create economic activity, and that way we can work our way out of this deficit, but we won't do it by punishing people. We'll do it by generating economic growth in this province.
So you're going to grow out, you're not going to cut?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I think that's it. We've got the end of June. It looks like you're in the running. Looks like we've got a race, so we'll see what happens. Frank Klees.
It's going very well. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming on the program. And still ahead on our final segment, your comments and the play of the week. A special two-parter this time of Rocket Men and Spitfires.